Hi, it's Robin. I'm still recovering from a bit of a cold flu. That's why there hasn't been a video from me for a while, and that's why I might still sound a little sick. Sorry about that. I've got here, is it the Commodore 64? No, it's the C64. Doo-doo. It just arrived here in Canada a couple days ago. And a disclaimer, I didn't purchase this, I wasn't a backer. Retro Games Limited sent it to me for free, and that's because I was a developer on this machine. Myself and my partner Sam at Pixel Games, we did some of the C64 programming that was involved in this. Specifically, the Hall of Fame, that lists all the backers, and then we also made modifications to a number of the included games just to make them work better, especially on the C64 Mini as it didn't have a keyboard. Here's the original European release that was, some people joked, was pre-yellowed. And here's the North American release where they adjusted the color a little bit. And I'm just bringing this up so it's clear that I did do some work on this. I'm not an employee. I was just a contractor. I don't have any other interest in this. I'm not getting paid to talk about this today. I'm going to be telling my view, my own opinions on this, but I just don't want somebody coming back and noticing my name is in the credits and accusing me of, I don't know, being dishonest in some way. And I got involved with this project because before the C64 Mini, there was this thing, the C64DTV. Jerry Ellsworth did the hardware, but I was the lead programmer on the software side of it. That was way back in 2004. And it was Darren Melbourne who was involved in this project and then this project as well. When development started on this, he contacted me and asked if I could help out. And so I gladly did. Part of why I'm going to do this episode today about the C64 is that a number of people have asked me if this is a good substitute for a real vintage C64. So my focus is going to be on that. Not so much the gameplay, but I'll touch on a number of things today. I've watched a few video reviews and lots of comments on Facebook, so I'll be addressing some of that today as well. So I'm just going to try and clear up some misconceptions, just give my opinion, and where I know the facts, I'll bring those up. So here it is. From a distance, it looks very much like a real breadbox Commodore 64. I'll bring one out to compare. So here's one. You can see the difference in the badges. They are the same size. The real 64 badge has a bit of a shine to it. I also see it has some grunge there that I thought I cleaned up but didn't. The color of the plastic is similar, but not exactly the same. But I'm not convinced there is one true color of Commodore 64. Even when I was young, I noticed that some were much more brown, some were much more beige, some were gray. And then when you add in yellowing and so on, it's like a rainbow of Commodore 64 possible colors. I wouldn't put too much stock in any particular color. The new one actually seems to have a little bit more texture on it than some of them, but this could be worn down through years of use. And just as another example, here is another bread box, and the color on that, I'm not sure if that's closer or there's three of them at once. Anyway, pretty close. One complaint I heard was that the C64, the new one, was taller, bigger than the classic. And there's actually truth to that. It's probably most obvious there. If I hold up this cartridge, it's actually quite a ways down. But, just like you shouldn't let anybody tell you that there's only one true color of Commodore 64, there isn't only one true size of breadbox 64 either. I'm going to swap this out for this other C64, and you'll see that these two are identical. That is absolutely level. To compare them more, this is the biggest difference. The original has the user port, cassette port, IEC port, audio-visual port, RF video out, channel selector, and the cartridge port, expansion port, while the new one has a single USB port, which actually I haven't tested to see if that's a normal one yet, HDMI video out, and the power in. And here on the side, the original has the power jack, power switch, and the two joystick ports, control ports, while the new one has a power button and 3 USB ports. Note that if the computer is off, this powers it on as you'd expect, To power it off again, you hold it for 5 or 6 seconds, and if you just press it quickly, it brings up the C64 menu where you can select different options and so on. So it's a multi-purpose button. One of the biggest complaints about the C64 Mini was that it only had 2 USB ports. So having 3 is great because you can have 2 joysticks and a USB drive plugged in all at once. The C64 certainly is a lot heavier than the C64 Mini. Feels pretty hefty, but not as much as a real 64. Okay, and actually, there it weighs almost 1.5 kilograms. 3.2 pounds or so. While the Classic weighs about 1.9 kilograms, almost 4 pounds. Obviously, the major feature over the C64 Mini is the proper working keyboard, and it seems pretty good. It feels a little bit lighter. So here's the C64, and here's a classic bread bin. There's a little bit of a loose rattle kind of sound. It's not huge, but the Classic does feel better. It's a different pitch. The C64 has replaced the classic Commodore logo with a TheC64 button. As far as I know, that's because they were able to license the ROMs and so on. They were unable to license the Commodore name and logo. And the only major difference is that on the real C64, there's this shift lock key, which actually physically depresses and locks, while the C64, it actually doesn't lock. It's just another key like any other. And there's a software shift lock that there's an on-screen indicator. Now, I assume that it was prohibitively expensive to do a real shift lock. I don't even know, like, do they even make locking keys like that for keyboards anymore? If you order a keyboard from China, are they even able to make a physically locking one? I don't know. I mean, for a reasonable amount of money. Other than that, they did a nice job of replicating the printing on the front of the keys, just like the original bread bins. Commodore themselves even cheaped out and started putting those symbols on the top of the keys in later models like the 64C I have here. You notice that they didn't do any of the front printing, even the function keys they didn't, because it is more expensive. So it's cool that Retro Games did spend the extra money on the authentic keyboard. The only thing that really bugs me about the keyboard here is the 0 key, that all the number keys are printed down along the bottom with the corresponding punctuation above them. The 0 key doesn't have any punctuation, and that key got centered, just like the plus and so on. Maybe to some eyes that looks more aesthetically pleasing, but this keyboard that I've been using for 35 years has the 0 key lined up with the other number keys. So I do find that disturbing to my eye. Of course, that wouldn't stop me from getting one of these, or it doesn't make me want to throw this one out I got, but that is a weird decision. A few of the other keys seem a little bit misaligned to me. Like the L key there doesn't seem centered quite as well, but that's probably getting into nitpicking territory. I'm glad this exists at all. And on the back side here, there is a serial number, which is kind of neat. Mine is number 714, and on Facebook I've seen numbers as high as, I think in the 2500s so far, so not sure how big the first run was. So I think Retro Games dealt with so many of the complaints of the original C64 Mini. For example, a switching power supply was included, and it's got interchangeable connectors here, and actually shipped with 4 different plugs that can be interchanged. So this is what we use here in North America. It of course comes with the USB power cable and an HDMI cable. And here's the C64 Mini joystick, which people did complain about. I didn't find it horrible, but it certainly isn't the best joystick I've ever used. I was able to finish Jumpman Jr. on the mini joystick, but it wasn't the easiest thing I've done. They've addressed that with the full size. is now a micro switched joystick, and it does seem better to me. I'll play with it a bit later. And the last remaining functionality problem with the firmware in the C64 Mini was that it wasn't easy to swap disk images. You had to do some workarounds, while it's very straightforward in this. We'll look at that in a bit. So we just attach the power here and the HDMI. And on this side, we can plug in the joystick. And this is also where we can plug in a USB drive, but we'll do that after. Okay, I'll power it up here, holding the power button at the side of the unit. There's the boot up screen. And here's the language selection screen. I'll choose English and then press the menu button. This is where you get to choose the video output. This has caused some controversy, some trouble. It's been working perfectly for me, but this is a very critical step where you choose either 50 Hz or 60 Hz for the video output over the HDMI. If you choose the wrong value, then the C64 may not behave the way you remember, and that's because the NTSC over here in North America C64 experience was based on a 60 Hertz video output, this choice here, and in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, etc., it was PAL, 50 Hertz. And this fundamentally changes how a lot of games behave, so it's very important that you choose the correct one. If your video display does not support both of these modes, then it might automatically select 50 or 60 Hertz. If for some reason your display isn't compatible with the current version of the C64 firmware, maybe some monitors don't follow the spec right. If the display doesn't communicate that it's capable of both 50 and 60, then you won't get that choice. And the only workaround may be that you have to find another display that supports both, use that, and possibly if you choose it on that and then bring it back to your other display, it will start working. These HDMI devices have a computer in them, and they have to send the right information. Of course, the C64 also has to interpret that correctly. I'm not going to say where the fault lies. This team has updated the firmware many times for the Mini. I have no doubt that they'll do the same for the full size, and any of these initial glitches at launch, I'm sure that they can be worked out. Okay, so here in North America, I'm going to choose 60 Hertz. I'm used to games working at 60 Hertz. When people online say this is too fast or this is too slow, I actually lived in Australia in 1987, and I owned PAL C64 there, and I own them here now. Maybe I'm a relatively rare person who understands the differences and wouldn't just say, that's wrong, that's too fast, or that's too slow. It's a matter of perspective. So finally, I'm going to choose 60. And there, it's in the video test mode. And it says, okay, and I'll just accept by pressing A down here. And then we can choose between the carousel mode or the classic mode. I'm going to do carousel for now. And then just hit the menu to go back out. And here we are at the main menu, where all the games are available. I noticed that Jumpman Jr. isn't here, which I'm a bit disappointed in, but of course I can just add it to a USB stick. It's not a big deal. But just the original Jumpman is on this version. I don't know if some of these games will change when there's a North American release, whether it's going to be exactly the same set worldwide this time, or there will be a bit of a different game selection. This isn't officially available here in Canada yet, but might as well deal with this controversy right away. If you run Impossible Mission, I saw this on Reddit, people are saying the 64 is crap because it's running too fast. Okay, well, this may be a minor problem. I'm going to launch Impossible Mission and listen to the pitch of the famous speech at the beginning here. Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever. Now I can hear that is pitched up quite a bit, but I found that if you run the unit in 50 Hertz mode, the pitch actually is the correct one. So here I've got a USB memory stick that I've put Impossible Mission on. Just got to plug it in one of those USB ports. Oh, there we go. And it detects it. I go in there, I go down to Impossible Mission, and select that. This is a cracked version by Remember. They always do excellent cracks of games. And this is the one that they have on GameBase 64, so that's where I downloaded it from. I'll point out here, okay, skip that with spacebar. It's nice not having to use the virtual keyboard of the C64 Mini. Skip that, and we'll just choose high score and load. Now listen.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
Okay, so that's the lower and correct pitch. So if that pitch problem bothers you, you can just download the same game on a USB memory stick and then it'll run correctly. So it really isn't a big deal. It's not a reason to say this sucks and you shouldn't buy one or whatever. Some people just huge overreactions, and I'm sure they'll smooth some of this out with firmware patches anyway, but there's a very easy workaround right there. Here, I'll even do the famous screen. We'll exit out. I notice the game is all stretched. That's because over here you can go into display modes, and the default are these pixel perfect versions that do square 1-to-1 pixels with your monitor. But what we really want, or what I want, is this one here, the North American 4.3 CRT. Let's choose that. And then I'll launch Impossible Mission again. And you see how the screen perspective is now much closer to a proper 4:3, which is what the C64 uses.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
Okay, enough of that. So yeah, down here you can change the display settings. Here you can change your language. And here's a whole bunch of tools, or settings, where you can choose your computer model. And I'm currently on C64 NTSC. I can change that to PAL. And this is where you can also select the VIC-20 mode, but I'm not going to be doing that today. There's so much to cover, even just with the C64 here. Boot mode, this is where we can switch over, and we'll start looking at classic now. I'm sure a lot of other reviews will go through the games, and I'm not going to get into all that today. I got a lot of other stuff I want to cover. So, classic mode. That's why I point another important screen here. System information. When people are complaining about the computer running too fast or too slow, here on this screen it shows the current build. So I've updated to firmware 1.31. By the way, this is where you can also, if there are new firmware updates here in the future, you can just download that from the C64 website, save it on a USB stick, and on this screen is where it'll prompt you to do the update. That video output, 60 Hertz, that's vitally important, because you may choose PAL or NTSC, but that isn't going to change this video output, which is the HDMI link. It's like there's two levels here, and I think that's necessary to get the smooth scrolling, smooth video output. They need the C64 and the display device, the monitor, running at a consistent 50 or 60 Hertz, and then the software emulation built on top of that. Maybe in the future they'll make it easier to tweak the two video outputs as well. Currently, you have to do a factory reset, as far as I know, and then you'll just go through that quick process again where you choose 50 or 60. Okay, let's switch to classic mode, and there it is. The classic blue screen, looking fairly NTSC to me. Now, here in classic mode, we can program in BASIC. So here, I'll just do my favorite one-liner. This is nicer to type on than an emulator, than like an emulator on your PC, because all the key mappings are correct, like where the brackets are, where the colon, semicolon, plus, minus are. So it's just nice. If you like your emulator, that's fine. You don't have to buy one of these. Here we go. We'll run it. Looks good. And now we can check by pressing the menu button. You can save state, which is just a quick way. You have 4 slots for any program, including BASIC. And here, you can just save it, save the memory of the computer, the entire state of the computer into one of these slots. Or, you can go Media Access. And down here, if you want to attach, I've made some TheC64, and in fact, even D81 files. This one called blank.d81. I'll just press A on that. You see now it says disk drive, blank d81.d81. That's like putting that virtual disk into the disk drive. And I'll just press the menu button to get back out. And we'll save that. We'll just call it something like 10 print, comma 8. Okay, and that quickly it saved it. And it's ready. And now we can load that directory, load $, comma 8, and list it. And there's our program. You see, because it's a D81 file I attached, it has 3160 blocks free when empty. So that's a huge amount. So this is an excellent environment. If you just want to code in BASIC, make a D81. In fact, maybe I should provide one for download in case you don't know how to make it, or you don't want to have to start up an emulator on your computer. Copy it to USB. Now, it'd be nice if you can make them within the C64. I don't think that's yet possible, but I hope that they'll add that in the near future. But if you're using a USB stick, you are probably already copying stuff from the internet. Surely you have a computer that you can do this on. This is a good basic environment, and to be able to get these large disks so you can save lots of revisions of your file, I think it's excellent. So if we type new, see how the program's gone. Well, of course, it was actually gone when we loaded $, comma 8. And now we can just load 10 print. And list it. And there it's back again. And run it. Now, of course, this is a very short program, but you could, if you're working on a much larger program, type in examples from the C64 User's Guide, Programmer's Reference Guide. They even have a tutorial, I think, on the Retro Games website. It's nice having the proper stop key. The C64 Mini, if it didn't have the controller in, it would have all kinds of trouble because there are no other controls. But I'm actually going to unplug joystick here. There, joystick's unplugged. And you can still use it. You can trigger the menu 2 ways. You can tap this button on the power button, and that brings up the menu. Or you can even hold left shift and the back arrow key, and that'll do it too. Right shift and the back arrow produces a regular back arrow. Well, of course, if you just press back arrow, it's fine too. That shouldn't have any incompatibility problems that they map that in. And then once you're in here, you can use, kind of strangely, O and P to move the cursor left or right. That almost seems like a spectrum kind of thing. Instead of using, I don't know why they didn't map that to the cursor keys, but anyway, it works. O and P lets you move around, and I believe spacebar selects, and U and J go up and down. So it's kind of a spectrum kind of arrangement. Use your left hand for moving, and then M lets you go back, is like the menu button. And if you want to change to a different disk, like let's move to this D71, you can press the space bar. There, and I've changed to that other blank, a D71 file. These are all like D64 files, actually should be called D41 files because it's 1541. The 71s are from a 1571, which is a double-sided Commodore drive that was made for the Commodore 128. And then D81s are that small 3.5-inch drive that Commodore made. So anyway, it's just nice that there's keyboard shortcuts, I think, for everything now. I'll plug that joystick back in. It's obviously handy to have. So another thing I wanted to look at was, can you program this in assembly language? So I copied over my favorite Turbo Macro Pro here. You can press that rocket ship, that's the second button, and that'll launch that disk. So it reset the computer. Now it loads the first file, but here I'll show you. Oops. That is not a bug in this, it's a kind of a bug in Commodore 64 in general. That's authentic. We load the directory and list it. Yeah, so the first file was Turbo Macro Pro. So it loaded the correct file. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't loading the RU version. Let's just try that again. Media access. Again, I'm going to launch Turbo Macro Pro. Alright, now the run doesn't work because this program needs a sys instruction, 32768. And there we are, in Turbo Macro Pro. And just like I've done in a number of videos before, loop, increment DO20, and jump back to loop. So that's just an endless loop that very rapidly changes the border color. Back arrow 3 to assemble it. S to start, and there it is, that flickery border. Now to interrupt it, if you press the stop restore combo, there, it brings you back to the basic screen, and then you can type in 32768 again, and you're back in your code again. Okay, so I'm just going to go into the USB drive, and here I've got Super Snapshot 522 ROM. There's also a PAL version, but I'm going to use this NTSC version. If I go on top of that and press launch, there it is. Super Snapshot comes up. Here, I'll put my real cartridge there. So you know I'm not violating any licenses. This is mine. Now we have most of the advantages of Super Snapshot. For example, to a directory here, we have those nice wedge shortcuts. We press %, that's the shortcut for COM8, 1. You see how quickly that loads? And now we can do 32768. And there we are in the editor. And if we exit back to basic here, so if I go into the options and reset the computer, you can also use Shift F8 to go into the monitor. And we have the machine code monitor, which I've shown before. And you can make like a little program, the same thing. Inc, DO20, jump back to C1000. That's the same program we just made. That's in memory now. And we can sys 49152. There it is. Again, we can get out of it. Back into the monitor. There's our program. So this is excellent that we can use utility cartridges. I assume Action Replay works as well. I don't know, this one's my favorite, so that's why I tested. You guys give Action Replay a try. You just have to find the CRT file, cartridge file, and put on your USB stick and then launch it. The only drawback here is that they have not, and this is kind of a big one, is that they have not implemented this extra freeze button. All these utility cartridges have a freeze button, which triggers a menu. It kind of freezes the computer and lets you do some things, including machine language monitor or saving the state of memory to a disk. Now, some of those things aren't even necessary because the C64 gives you ways around that anyway with like those state saves. But this is something I would love to have. A future firmware update should totally be able to implement that, and I think it'll be easy for the developers to do. They just have to make it a priority. So I hope people who buy this do request that feature, and that would make this a fantastic environment. Another thing that the C64 is missing is that a real C64 also is missing is a reset button. The Commodore 128 has one built in. A number of devices, such as this cartridge expander that I have from CMD, the EX3, has this reset button on it. And what that button does is just grounds the reset line in the expansion port. Commodore 64 goes back to the blue basic boot screen as if you've powered cycled it, with the major exception that RAM is more or less left intact. So what that means is that if you've crashed the computer, or if you want to load a game and then slightly modify the game and then start the game again, the reset button is what allows you to do that. It allows you to restart the computer without losing what's in memory. It's super useful when you're assembly language programming and the computer crashes on you. So rather than losing your source code and having to reload your assembler, you can just start it up again often and recover with the reset button. So I wish they'd add that feature. Now note, under options, there is a reset computer here, but this is a hard reset which wipes memory out. So if they could just add a soft reset, rename this one to hard reset, and then add a soft reset option here, we'd be set. Even better if there was a single key shortcut, so you could just tap this button and, for example, press F1 to do a soft reset and F7 to do a cartridge freeze. That would be awesome, because, you know, rather than having to mess around the menus, just press the button and then you can do that. That'd be fantastic. Just to prove that that reset is a hard reset, we'll just do a peek of 49152. You see that's 238 currently. I'll go reset the computer. It's gone back to basic. And peak 49152. So it's being wiped back to 0. With a soft reset feature, or a reset button on a real C64, memory would still be intact. It would still be 238. And the final thing I'd love them to add is this RAM expansion unit here. This can store source code and the assembler, and it survives basically any kind of crash, and it also speeds up assembly and allows much bigger source files. It's a fantastic device if you want to develop on the real hardware. Vice actually emulates that, and there's a way of fooling the C64 into having a RAM expansion unit. I'll show you how that works. Okay, so the way to get this to work is you have to eject any disk or cartridges that you may have attached. At least I think this is what's required. It's what worked for me. Then launch that snapshot file. I'll include a link to download it in the description below. It was made on my Mac in Vice 2.4, and I attached an REU, made a snapshot, a state save, which is a VSF file, it saves it as, renamed it to TheC64, which is the trick the guy on Facebook showed me, and then this is the file here. So you launch that with the B button, and it kind of crashes weird like this. Okay, and that's enabled the REU. And now you can go in here and launch the cartridge, the Super Snapshot cartridge. All right. And then you can insert the Turbo Macro Pro disc. Let's give that a try. Load the REU version of the assembler. And there it is, 512K enabled down the bottom right corner there. Okay, so there is REU support. It's just not quite so easy to get at. And we can prove this is working if we set to assemble to C1000 and then do that same little program. Oh, I forgot to put a label there. There, jump, loop. Okay, and now back arrow 3 to assemble. It's assembled it to C1000, which is part of where the assembler itself lives, but in the REU version, it can safely save it anywhere in RAM. While if you're using the non-REU version, you cannot assemble to higher memory like this. And we'll press S to start. And there it is. Flickery border. And the screen's full of garbage because it transfers the RAM unit, which is initialized to 0, down into C64 memory. So unless you initialize that yourself, it's just going to show those zeros on screen. That's what those @ symbols are. And we can just hit stop, reset. And we use the little jump back routine that pulls the assembler back down from REU memory, sys320. And there it is, we're back in, our source code is intact. The C64 does have RAM expansion support, but there's that's the hack to get at it. I hope that they'll include it as an official feature in an update soon. I want to point out that there's an excellent manual to be downloaded online, a big PDF that has all kinds of good in-depth configuration options and so on for this device, so check that out. I think this is an excellent device. If you feel I'm too biased or whatever, well, just check out some other reviews. But this is my own take on it. You know I have all kinds of real Commodore 64s. Do I have any use for this? There are a few cases where I would choose to use this over my real C64s. I would use this because it has HDMI. If I want to set up a Commodore where I know there's going to be an HDMI TV or projector in my living room to show the kids something, or if I'm going to bring it out for a presentation, which yes, I actually do sometimes, I might actually take this because of how easy it is. Just one power cord and the HDMI, bring a USB stick full of stuff, and it's ready to go. Being able to switch between PAL and NTSC on this easily, I haven't demonstrated that fully, but it is easy to switch between PAL and NTSC. Getting a real C64 to switch between NTSC and PAL is not trivial. So if I just want to check out something that's on the internet quickly, right on here is nice. If I still want a dedicated joystick, dedicated monitor, and so on. Now I might just use my Vice emulator for that, but I like being over here at my Commodore station rather than sitting at my desktop computer where I'm always getting interruptions online. So it's just nice to have it in one place. And this also handles T64 files, G64 files, and some others that my real C64 doesn't handle, or at least not easily. So that's an advantage too. I'm not going to quit using my real Commodore 64, and in my future videos I'll keep using real hardware. But I think this is a totally valid, useful device that even I can find some use for. And for people who don't have a bunch of real Commodore 64s already accessible, this is an excellent alternative. Okay, did I miss anything? If I did, and maybe I'll make a follow-up video, and maybe new issues will come up and I'll want to get my take in on them as well. And one other thing I want to show you on the way out here, Santron. This is a brand new game quite a few months ago. I played Neutron, a game by Sarah Jane Avory, and she's done a new version of it that is Christmas themed. So I bought it for a couple bucks online. It's a free download, but you can just make a donation. I thought it'd be a good way of testing out the new joystick. And if I can do okay at this, let's see. Okay, I'm turning auto fire on so you don't have to hear the clack, clack, clack of the joystick. Even on my real Commodore, people were complaining in the last video that it was too noisy. Here we go. Now those micro switches are a lot louder. But that's just kind of the nature of it. Ooh. I get the power up. Ooh, nice. Sorry that I'm not talking. I can't talk and play these games well. Talk more and I'll die. Ah, that was close. Boss. Notice that this game is like the original. Just said it's PAL only, but it actually is working totally fine in NTSC. That was the case there. Hey. Stage 1 cleared. I'm not noticing any lag here. If there is, it's not enough to affect. Yeah. Okay, that glitching, I'm sure that was exactly how an NTSC, oh boy, okay, this level is a lot trickier. So what was I trying to say? Yeah, that glitching looked like classic NTSC not being able to keep up because it's running at 60 frames per second. Oh. Mini boss. Oh. Oi! That is a lot of sprites for a 64 game. So is this running? This might be a lot harder. When Retro Man Cave was complaining about it's too fast, I'm like, this is what us NTSCers played so many games 20% faster than you PAL guys. Yeah. So hey, maybe we're better at video games, eh? Okay, level 3. This is actually only my second time I've ever played this. Oh, okay. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks to my supporters on Patreon. If you want to support me, then please do check out the link in the description below. There's some perks and so on that you might like if you enjoy the videos I make here. Thanks for watching. You have Merry Christmas, and talk to you next time.
Jolly old St. Nicholas, lean your ear this way. Don't you tell a single soul what I'm going to say. Christmas Eve is coming soon, now you dear old man. Whisper what you'll bring to me, tell me if you can. When the clock is striking 12, when I'm fast asleep, down the chimney broad and black, with your pack you'll creep. I do love the computer that I got last year, but now would like some upgrades, please, won't you, Santa dear? I would like my own disk drive, cause that's too slow to load, and a big pack of blank disks on which to save my code. Also get me a disk notcher to use the backside. Yes, I know I could use scissors, but this is quicker and looks much more